In this part of the program, we review world leaders' pledges at the Rio +20 summit this week and look at how outcomes in Rio will impact international relations. World leaders took the floor at the Rio +20 environmental summit, where governments have launched new energy initiatives and investors have pledged billions in support for renewable energy initiatives.
More than 50 governments have launched new energy strategies, while private investors have pledged more than $50 billion to global renewable energy initiatives. This, according to the United Nations. South African President Jacob Zuma lauded the efforts at the UN Development Conference.
We regard Rio +20 to be a critical meeting that should agree on how to fast-track the implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda.
Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan said environmental issues were intertwined with social and economic concerns.
For us in Africa, the green economy is an agenda for growth, wealth creation, and employment generation. We believe that the promotion of a green economy must be underlined by clear national objectives, social and economic development imperatives, and the attainment of the Millennium Development Goals.
Jonathan's comments were echoed by Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
Mr. Chairman, economic development, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability are all equally critical as components of sustainable development. The task before us is to give practical shape and content to this architecture in a manner that allows each country to develop according to its own national priorities and circumstances.
The draft document finalized on Tuesday laid out aspirations rather than mandatory goals on issues like food security, water and energy. It also called for countries to pursue sustainable development goals, a vague set of UN objectives built around the environment, economic growth and social inclusion. Many of those who agreed on the draft said it was stripped of vital specifics, and diplomats said Brazil's push for a draft document had forced delegations to focus and come to an agreement. But it may have shut the door on bolder action by leaders. They added that it left little leeway for the draft to improve before a final pronouncement later today.
More than 100 presidents and prime ministers gathered in Rio de Janeiro this week for the first Earth Summit in 2 decades. We discussed how the summit will affect international relations with Dr. Oscar van Heerden, Director of Research and Strategy firm Africa Analysis.
One of the key things with these international gatherings is really about translating what is discussed at those conferences into domestic policy. I think that ordinarily, because you are under pressure, there's all sorts of power plays in the corridors at these conferences, etc. All sorts of promises are made and commitments. But when delegations get back home and look at the realities back domestically, they find it difficult to translate it into policy.
So what now? Because like you said, and you've also mentioned this, commitments have been made, promises have been made, and now we talk about new priorities being set, new deadlines. How can we begin to make new priorities, new deadlines, when we haven't even been able to meet the commitments of the past?
Indeed, I mean, this is one of the dilemmas that's being faced, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the situation that Rio 20 happens in parallel to a general fragility within the European Union. The Doha round is coming into the equation. A general panic as to the global markets, and so a number of global leaders and delegations at Rio 20, although they are supposed to be discussing sustainable development and how we take that process forward, they have a lot of other things on their minds.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this this issue of sustainability and food security. I mean, we had a story earlier on of just how many more people we're expecting in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, and whether we're actually going to be able to even feed those people. Let's talk a little bit about food security and what the future is looking like right now.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, one of the key issues that usually is overlooked within sustainable development is the issue of the social issues and people. Huge poverty globally, particularly in Africa. In South Africa we have lots of unemployment, inequality, and so when there is talk of sustainable development, issues of food security, issues of water scarcity, agrarian reform, etc., all of these are top of the priority in terms of the domestic situation. And so until such time that this social issues find center stage within the broader discussions around sustainable development, I'm afraid it simply is not going to yield the necessary results.
I want to ask you about how relevant Africa is to the rest of the world, because like you mentioned, there is an issue that's going on in Europe right now that has hit just about every country on the planet, just in terms of repercussions from that crisis. But we've seen this not just with the Eurozone crisis, we saw it in the financial crisis again, that Africa was just so hard hit. How relevant is what is happening on the African continent to the rest of the world, just in terms of focus and attention and what needs to be happening on this continent?
Very, very relevant. Africa is a very relevant continent in a number of respects. One, it's a consistently growing market. There's appetite for new venture creation. There's huge swaths of very arable land that can be used in terms of food security. And just in the main, if we look at sustainable development, given the crises that is being faced not only in the European Union but North America generally, Africa does actually occupy a very, very central position.
The Southern African Development Community recently hosted a validation workshop for the region's infrastructure master plan. Joao Chaulo, Deputy Executive Secretary of Regional Integration for SADC, explained.
The master plan is actually a long-term 15-year development framework seeking to address the gaps that we have identified in our roadmap towards regional integration. You know, SADC as a regional development community, one of the building blocks of the African Union, has as its mission to deepen regional integration amongst its 15 member states. And in so doing is challenged because our countries are small economically, our countries are small population-wise, and for us to be able to call ourselves a sub-region and to make meaning to any developmental agenda, we needed to have a program that seeks to interconnect and fill the missing gaps, as it were, in the puzzle.
Let's look at a couple of the areas that you're talking about, and obviously if you achieve them all, you've achieved a great deal. For example, infrastructure, which I presume primarily is rail and road?
No. In SADC, when we talk about infrastructure, we are talking about energy generation and transmission, transboundary. We are talking about transport in all its modes: railway, roads, air, maritime, inland waterways, and ports. We are talking about services like tourism, water, meteorology, and naturally we are also talking about hardcore ICT infrastructure interconnectivity projects.
Well, let's take the transport aspect, and there has been talk of a Trans-Kalahari. We had someone from Namibia in the other day talking about their link with...
Precisely.
So, but these are big projects.
They are indeed big projects. Trans-Kalahari is actually an attempt to link the western coast of SADC to the eastern coast through Gauteng and the Maputo port. So it is our desire that for the business communities in Southern Africa willing to do business, they should have N alternatives to export or import their goods and equipment, instruments, etc., and even to do intra-SADC trade or business. So the Port of Walvis Bay, through the Trans-Kalahari program, links directly through Lobatse in Botswana to the Gauteng industrial area and through Gauteng to Maputo port. So you can see the alternatives and the scenarios for anybody who wants to do business. But it's not the only one. We have the North-South corridor, for example, trying to link the port of Durban, which is currently one of the most used, preferred ports of most of the countries in Southern Africa, DRC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, even Tanzania and Malawi. And it seeks to connect this port to, for example, the port of the town of Lubumbashi in DRC. And if we had the Lobito corridor, for example, seeking to connect the Lobito port, which is a natural deep water port on the Angolan coast, to the Copperbelt in DRC and Zambia, and through it through the Tazara Railway to Dar es Salaam, you can see any opportunities that exist for anyone requiring to do business.
After the break, more stories making headlines this week.